Good evening everyone, Darrell Poole, Smooth Power LLC. This evening we're going to show you the proper technique, or at least my technique, for setting up the Electroair spark plug wires, which I have here in front of me. This is one of the things that a lot of our installers have quite a bit of trouble with. Creates problems, can create problems with the system running properly. So we really need to make sure that this gets done correctly. I've already pre-cut a wire that I'm going to demonstrate with. Here it is. This wire is an 8.5 millimeter wire. It's manufactured specifically for Electroair to handle the 70,000 volts of electricity that's going to transfer through this to our spark plug. The center core is wrapped with a very fine stainless steel wire. I don't know if the camera can catch this or not, but a little piece of it is actually sticking out. It's wrapped very tightly around the center core. Multiple wraps, tons of wraps. And the electricity actually uses the skin effect to travel over the top of that coiled wire. With that said, we need to be really careful when we set these up and make sure that we don't pull that wire out and leave a gap down in the wire, because we want to make sure when we install our spring that it's actually riding on top of that coil. We don't want it to go dead center. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. I've laid out our parts. We've got our barrel nut, our ferrule, our washer, and our spring. It's the only parts that we need for each assembly. The first thing that I typically do, and you can do this however you want to do it, I actually use a really sharp knife. Put my glasses on so I don't cut myself. Trying to shove this complete wire through this ferrule is very difficult. So what I do to make the process a little easier to get started, I'm just going to shave off a section. Try not to get all the way down to the center core. A little bit more on the end here. Actually, you can also use dikes for this procedure, whatever you want to use. Anyway, we've shaved that down, got rid of some of the material. It's going to make it easier for us to install the ferrule. First thing we want to make sure is we install the nut. It goes on first. Now I'm ready to go ahead and install this ferrule, but what I'm going to do is lubricate it a little bit. Going to use some my friends from ACF 50 supply me with sample bottles, which I very much appreciate. It's excellent product for corrosion protection. I use their little bit heavier duty product. We live down here in Texas City on the Gulf Coast, and it's handy to have around the house because corrosion's always an issue. We're just going to lubricate that wire up, make it a little bit easier for this nut to slide on. I'm sorry, the ferrule. We've already got our nut on. This ferrule is going to go on with the flats first. So what we're going to do, we're just going to get that started in here and shove that down in there until we've got some sticking out the other side. Now we've got something we can grab a hold of. Go ahead and make sure you got some lubrication up the wire here. And I use safety wire pliers. You can use whatever you want to use. But you want to grab the entire outside diameter of the wire. Move up a little bit. And pull that thing through. I've already pre-marked this wire. I know how long this wire needs to be for the particular installation. I've got it marked here, so I've pulled it well past that mark. All this wire down here, and you get plenty of excess in the kit. I pretty much have already damaged this wire by grasping it with the pliers, so we're gonna get rid of all that wire. So since I've already got this marked, I'm going to cut this right at my mark. Try to keep this nice and square. Cut that off. And if you can zoom in there, I want you to take a look. You can see that wire, it's actually coming out. We don't want to leave that hanging out there. If we do, there's a really good chance that that is going to arc the inside of the plug. Fortunately, on my little multi-tool here, I've got a nice little pair of scissors. So I'm going to take and trim this off nice and flush, just like that. So now, what I want to do is make sure that I've got the proper length here. And I forgot to bring I had made a short piece. What I do is I make a short piece of wire to determine that length. But since we're going to start from scratch here, I'll show you a better way to do it actually for the very first one that you do, so that you know what that length needs to be. I already know this is going to need to be a little bit longer. Slide that up there a little bit more. Actually got a little wire coming out again, so I want to make sure I get that trimmed off. Here's the most critical part, is installing the spring. Remember what I said earlier, we don't want this spring dead center. We don't want it right down the middle. We want it just on the outside of that center core. And when you do this yourself and you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. You want to start your spring end just on the outside. You can see that, just on the outside. We're going to start pushing that in. And you're going to feel it as it's going in, running right across the top of that cold wire. It's actually going to bump a little bit as you go down, and you want to make sure you feel that all the way to the bottom. The reason for that, if you don't, it means the spring tang may have changed directions and it may want to start crawling to the outside, the OD of the wire. If it does, we get a really short distance between the wire and the inside of the spark plug. We could get an arc. We don't want that. So we want to make sure it goes right down along the edge. Just like that. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to look, this is an actual aircraft spark plug. I want to push that in and have some good tension on it. I still have a washer to put in here, a spacer. So let's go ahead and slide that up there as well. There we go. Now she's sliding on there. There's our gasket. Now I want to go back again and feel this. The spring has touched right there. So I got this much more to go. Now I know I have good compression on the spring. And the very last thing that I like to do, this washer is a tight fit in the nut. I'm going to bring this nut up and get the washer started. Down into the nut. And then I like to take my spark plug and actually use the spark plug to put that gasket in position. This one's being a little extra stubborn, but that's good. We want a tight fit there. You could put a little bit of lubrication on this gasket as well if you choose to. One end here that just doesn't want to go. There we go. It's always good to have a little bit of a fingernail left. I know most of us mechanics typically don't have fingernails. But I'm going to use that. This one's being a real booger. Now we're getting her in there. Push that gasket in and actually thread that plug on there. And keep working it so that we know that we've seated that gasket. Now our gasket has seated. It's also very important to remember when you do your final installation and you tighten up this barrel nut, you don't need to torque this thing to 150 foot-pounds. I don't remember what the book calls for, but it's actually inch-pounds. You don't want to over-torque this nut because it will damage that gasket. So there we go, folks. That's the proper setup for an Electroair ignition wire. The very last thing that we're going to do, we're going to check resistance. This is a calibrated ohm meter. We've got it set on 200K. The resistance that we're looking for is 5,700 ohms per linear foot. This particular wire is 40 inches long, so we are just over 3 feet, 3.5 feet, something like that. So you'd multiply 3.5 times the 5,700 to get your value. Plug that down in there. See what we got. 18,000 ohms. Pretty much right on the money. Now we know this wire is good to go and ready to install in the aircraft, and we should not have any issues with this wire whatsoever. Thank you very much for watching, and safe flying.